fire, because the climate crisis is causing people in this country and around the world to be displaced from their homes, their jobs, their communities. Because generations before us made bold investments to give us the first solutions to this crisis. President Biden has made it very clear we must act, and we must act now. So the Biden-Harris administration is mobilizing every possible innovation to save our kids and our planet. Every tool to make life better for us all, especially the most vulnerable among us. I'm serving as the leader of the Office of Science and Technology Policy, but I am also its Deputy Director for Science and Society, in which I've led a first-of-its-kind team at OSTP that works to translate the Biden-Harris administration's principles into policy where science and technology intersect with people's lives and communities. And in this work, I've been reminded recently that when Congress created OSTP almost 50 years ago, they wrote some prescient words into our founding statute, here. While maximizing the beneficial consequences of technology, the government should act to minimize foreseeable injurious consequences. In that regard, we have to remember that it's not enough to just get the technology right. From day one, we need an inclusive approach to technology development, where every part of our society, especially those who are marginalized or vulnerable, have a say about safety, about jobs, and about facility siting, as well as the opportunity to get the knowledge and skills needed to participate in emerging clean energy industries and benefit from their inventions. Let's make sure that that happens together. So welcome again to the White House, to this historic first ever Fusion Summit. I hope we can all be back here in a decade together to celebrate the star power we have ignited with these conversations today. And talking about star power, and with that, it is my pleasure to introduce the 16th United States Secretary of Energy, a champion of cutting-edge clean energy technologies, Secretary Jennifer Granholm.
Thank you so much, Dr. Nelson. I really appreciate it. Appreciate your leadership. So glad that DOE is working with OSTP and with so many of those who may be in this room and have interest in this and expertise in it. Obviously, researchers have long believed that fusion can just unlock this new paradigm in energy if we could just crack the code. And as Dr. Nelson said, over the past 7 decades, the national labs and the universities have gotten closer and closer, and we all know that we've all been saying, just around the corner, right? You know, there have been significant breakthroughs delivered, right, in physics. We've developed technologies to allow us to heat and to control plasmas that are 10 times hotter than the center of the sun. But we also know that we've got to manage expectations as well. There's a reason why fusion is hard. It's hard, right? And so it's going to take time, even though we are making amazing progress. We have to be careful about overpromising, and we have to be realistic. So, you know, we believe that we are really making progress. We're seeing close to ignition. We know that this is happening, but we also know that you know, even when you get close to ignition, it's going to take time before this is commercialized, right? And I think about the president's goal of getting to 100%, for example, clean electricity by 2035, beyond this decadal vision, and wow, it would be amazing if fusion were part of what I call the silver buckshot of, not silver bullet, but silver buckshot of getting to that clean energy future. We hope that's what we're striving for. But by 2050, for sure, this has to happen, which is the goal of getting to net zero. I'll pause here because I see Representative Beyer, Representative Fleischman here. I mean, the bipartisan support for fusion is just so important because we are asking for congressional continued investment in this, and that you too have been such champions of fusion R&D. We're really grateful for that. We also know that it's not just us alone. We know countries around the world are clamoring to get ahead on fusion technology. We know that private sector investment, as was noted, is just booming at $3 billion in private sector investment last year. You know, we've also heard from professors that students are really interested in this, which is very, very exciting. So we can hopefully create a pipeline of the next generation of scientists too that are willing to do this. And the landscape around fusion research and development and demonstration, we think is shifting. And so our strategy has to shift with it, has to change with it. And that's why we are excited to be joining with the Office of Science and Technology Policy to craft a bold vision for this decade of driving commercial fusion toward acceptance of fusion, deployment. And so we are announcing two initial actions, DOEs, toward this effort. First, we are launching an agency-wide, a DOE-wide fusion initiative. And so going forward, DOE is going to be coordinating all fusion energy research under one umbrella to seize the opportunity to advance the technology. I'm excited to announce that Scott Shue
5 दिसंबर 2021 से हमने मिशन कर्मयोगी अभियान के अंतर्गत ऐतिहासिक शीतकालीन फाउंडेशन कोर्स की यात्रा आरंभ की। यह यात्रा थी भारतीय सिविल सेवा एवं रॉयल भूटान सिविल सेवा की 488 प्रशिक्षु अधिकारियों की।
contribution to this vision is that we're announcing a funding opportunity announcement of $50 million today for basic fusion energy research that will support the design for a fusion plant.
96 फाउंडेशन कोर्स के माध्यम से इसी मंत्र को मूर्तिमान
It's
करने
not
का
enough
उत्साहपूर्ण
to
प्रयास
start,
किया
but we
गया।
just want to make sure we are putting our money where our mouth is. Our effort with OSTP is going to be focused on more than just innovation, though, and this is really important. It's about building out a fusion energy workforce that looks like America, that's diverse, that's equitable, that's inclusive, and super important, we want to make sure that we are establishing trust in
फाउंडेशन
this
कोर्स
technology
में
among the public,
48%
because
अधिक
we know
शैक्षणिक
communities might
अवधि
not be thrilled
एवं
about
विश्व स्तरीय
having
शिक्षण
a
पद्धति द्वारा
facility next
रूल
to them
बेस्ड
that
से
houses an
रोल
energy
बेस्ड कार्य प्रणाली
source
की
that is
नींव
as
रखी
powerful
गई।
as the sun. We get it. That is a legitimate concern, obviously. And so it's really important for us to emphasize that commercial fusion
It is very
is going to
important for
have
a successful
an
bureaucrat to
extremely high
attend to
threshold for
is
safety.
the
And
stakeholders
we need to
management.
engage community leaders on that and other stakeholders early and often to make that really clear. We need to listen to their concerns. We need to show them that safety and security
जहां विलेज
and
विजिट ने
open
हमें
communication is going to
विनम्रता,
be the
करुणा,
foundation of this
सेवा
industry.
एवं धरातल की सच्चाइयों से
Sidecar.
परिचित कराया,
So,
वहीं हिमालयन
we're
ट्रैक
starting
ने हमें
right now.
अपने साथियों के
I'm
साथ
eager to
विषम
launch,
परिस्थितियों का
and
सामना करना एवं
I'm
धैर्य
eager to
और
work with the
सहनशीलता का
partners
पाठ
inside
पढ़ाया।
of government and with stakeholders
activities
outside
में
of
हमारे
government as
तन, मन,
well.
प्राणों में
And one of the great
नवचैतन्य
stakeholders inside of government is
Trustees,
my
we are the
friend
custodians
and
and we are the
dominable, I
stewards.
think she's up
And in
there,
this spirit, I would like to conduct
inimitable
myself.
Gina
Service to
on this
me
St. Patrick's
means
Day.
a
McCarthy.
responsibility to be part of the nation
Gina,
as
you there?
it navigates
I
the
am,
trial.
Madam Secretary, and happy St. Patrick's Day to everybody. It's really great to be able to join you, although I wish I could have been there in person. But I'm really excited about the summit today and to have Dr. Nelson in her new leadership position. It is really an exciting moment in time. And I think that Dr. Nelson is just a terrific addition to the Biden-Harris team. And of course, my friend and colleague, Secretary Granholm, is really, truly a magnificent secretary, no matter what number she is. And she is carrying a great weight on her shoulders and doing it with grace and smarts and dignity and energy that's just unmatched. But you all know that President Biden understands, as all of us do gathered here today, that we have to take strong action on climate now if we ever hope to meet this climate head on. And we are going to do just that. But we have to be smart. We have to take actions that present huge opportunities for us, as well as opportunities for the planet. We need really lasting opportunities so we can create millions of good paying jobs. We can tackle the injustice that we have in this world by investing and engaging wisely. And we can lead the world with new energies and innovation. And that is exactly what we are doing and why we are gathered today. We have to act on climate change so our country can win the 21st century economy. And that's what fusion helps to present us with. Tremendous opportunities as well as challenges we know. You know, in his first year in office, President Biden mobilized every federal agency to tackle the climate crisis. He committed the U.S. to achieving 100% carbon-free electricity. Yes, carbon, Secretary Granholm, carbon-free electricity by 2035 and reaching net zero emissions no later than 2050. But to do this, we have to fast track the climate solutions that are available to us right now, like more solar projects on public lands, like the launch of a new American offshore wind industry, and electric vehicle manufacturing right here in America. And we have seen tremendous progress so far. And thanks to the bipartisan infrastructure law, we're upgrading our power grid. We're building out a national electric vehicle charging network so people don't have range anxiety. We're improving public transit and cleaning up legacy pollution. We know we need lots of efforts moving forward. And as a result, the federal government itself is walking the walk. We're leading the way by electrifying our vehicles and our buildings, as we should. So I'm glad to be here with all of you at the launch of what could be another American clean energy game changer, fusion energy. Fusion energy could provide a virtually limitless source of clean electricity and heat, available when and where it's needed. Getting fusion technology to viability could be a critical tool for reducing emissions while meeting our clean energy needs. And of course, we could create really good jobs in the process. That's why this administration, as Secretary Granholm just said, is all in on this issue. And as Dr. Nelson mentioned, I recently traveled with her and leaders from DOE to the Princeton the Fusion Physics Lab, where we met with some of the scientists working hard in advancing fusion energy. It was exciting to see how the US is really involved in technologies of the future just like this. But we know we have to do it right. And that's why it's important to heavily engage a broad set of stakeholders from the very beginning so we can all better understand the technology and articulate in plain language, which is really hard for scientists sometimes, especially those involved in technologies as intricate and as difficult to explain as this one, but we have to articulate it in plain language so people understand the benefits as well as any of those risks, and make sure we center equity every step of the way. You know, it was exciting to be at Princeton with Dr. Nelson and others because they understood these issues. They raised them to us. They talked about the challenges ahead, not just the benefits that they hope to accrue from this new technology. And they talked about the way that they plan to engage the community moving forward, already having done that within the school and beyond, but recognizing that everybody needs to buy into these solutions. And if we invest wisely, we will bring everybody with us and move these technologies forward. And this technology holds tremendous promise. And if done right, it can distinguish itself as a better choice among many choices moving forward on how we're going to address climate change and keep people's costs down and the jobs growing. So we are in a decisive decade right now, and we need to advance bold climate action, both by deploying the technologies we already have, which Secretary Granholm never fails to mention. Lots and lots of them are available to us, but we also have to be a bit of a cheerleader on how America can grow as a clean energy innovation hub. We need to help achieve the president's bold climate goals, and you're helping to do that. So thanks everybody for gathering. Again, I wish I could be with you, and make sure you celebrate the green today. Happy St. Patrick's Day. And with that, I'll turn the mic back to Dr. Nelson.
Gina, happy St. Patrick's Day to you and all. Great, you are here. You're not here, but you are here. Thank you for those wonderful, energizing remarks. It is now my pleasure to introduce the chair of the Council of Environmental Quality, Brenda Mallory.
Good morning, everyone. It is such a pleasure to be here, and I find myself often following Gina and Secretary Granholm, and both always get me so inspired I forget that I have a role here. So it's such a pleasure to be here and to be part of this very important event. So thank you, Alondra, just for that introduction. And I should say to everyone in the room, good morning from the White House. It is such a pleasure to have real people sitting in the same room with me and had the opportunity to just exchange on this particular issue, which I think is so important. So let me start first with the Council on Environmental Quality. We have the role of coordinating the federal government's efforts to improve, preserve, and protect America's environment, public lands, and health. So while capturing the power of fusion energy here on Earth is thrilling science, it presents both promise and pause to the communities. By working to integrate environmental justice on the front end of development, we have a chance to ensure that fusion energy benefits all communities and does not repeat harmful mistakes that have happened in the past. Earlier this month, President Biden became the first president to use the words environmental justice in a State of the Union address. This was significant because it reaffirmed the Biden-Harris administration's commitment to put interests of communities that are marginalized, underserved, and overburdened by pollution at the center of our environmental and climate policy. Today is a reminder that we must center them in our energy policy as well. Frontline and fence line communities, especially in areas that have historically produced fossil fuel American uses, know all too well how energy development can disproportionately impact our most vulnerable citizens. Over the past year, we have begun the hard work of alleviating the environmental burdens that so many communities are experiencing. Through unprecedented investments in the bipartisan infrastructure law, we are replacing lead pipes, accelerating Superfund cleanups, cleaning up abandoned mines and oil wells, protecting most vulnerable communities from fires, floods, and storms. And agencies are banning toxic pesticides, confronting persistent pollutants, cutting tailpipe pollution, and cleaning up the air we breathe. The federal government is once again holding polluters accountable by enforcing our environmental laws. And because of that, it is truly a breath of fresh air to talk today about a technology that is zero emissions, a technology that holds the promise to be reliable and bountiful enough to meet America's and the world's growing clean electricity needs. In addition to working to alleviate the pollution and climate change risks that disproportionately fall on low-income communities and communities of color, the president has directed us to confront a legacy of underinvestment in communities that for far too long have been left behind. We are doing so through the Justice 40 initiative, which seeks to direct 40% of the overall benefits of climate, clean energy, and other federal investments to disadvantaged communities. Across the government, we are working to transform hundreds of federal programs to ensure they reach communities that are overburdened, underserved, and marginalized. The administration has prioritized clean energy development and workforce development in rural communities, in disadvantaged communities, and in areas historically dependent on fossil fuel economies. So it's exciting today to talk about a whole new industry that you and so many others are poised to create. And right at the beginning, the very first summit asked the question, how can we ensure all communities can benefit from the transformational change we hope to spur along today? So with that, I just am grateful that you all are here. I'm grateful for this effort going forward, and I will turn the mic back over to Alondra.
So in his State of the Union address, the president offered for us a unity agenda and reminded us that there are things that we agree upon. And fusion energy is one of these things. And we are absolutely delighted to have two members of Congress here with us to talk, to offer some remarks. So first, I would like to introduce Congressman Don Beyer of Virginia, who is chair of the bipartisan House Fusion Caucus. Thank you, Congressman Beyer.
Good morning. Genesis chapter 1, verse 3. God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. And that light came from fusion energy. All of the fossil fuel we burn was created by light from fusion. Every atom heavier than hydrogen in our body and in our world was created by fusion. We are made of stardust. To those skeptics who believe that fusion energy is impossible, there are 100 billion stars in our galaxy and 2 trillion observable galaxies in our observable universe, and every single one of them is powered by fusion energy. Gravity gives us fusion, and fusion gives us life. You know, we will always worry about peak oil and peak coal and peak natural gas. No one ever worries about peak seawater. So good morning, and thank you for inviting me to participate in this existentially exciting summit on commercial fusion energy. I'm thrilled that these important discussions at the White House with all the big brass from our national stuff. And we can successfully forge a path to successful fusion energy. Secretary Gramhold, thank you for your agency-wide fusion initiative. Thank you for the $100 million, $50 million. I'm sure there will be people who will take this here today. Fusion is the holy grail of climate change and decarbonized future. But even more important, I think, and more profoundly, fusion has the potential to lift more citizens of the world out of poverty than anything since the invention of fire. I started the Fusion Energy Caucus about this time last year. We have more than 50 members, Democrats and Republicans. I'm thrilled that my good friend and co-leader Chuck Fleischmann is here. Our mission as a caucus is to educate the members of Congress, and more importantly, their staffs, about the breakthroughs, the research, and the increasing potential of fusion energy to transform the global energy sector. But it's even more important to let the public know about this. I try to include this in every speech, really in every conversation, to continue the process of teaching what fusion energy is not, Chernobyl, Fukushima, and what it actually is. Another part of our mission in the caucus is to try to pull the legislative levers we have at our disposal to advance this agenda. To that end, we've held a Science, Space, and Technology Committee hearing. The caucus has had several briefings with many of the experts here in this room. And we've had several iterations of funding and authorizations for fusion programs pass the House this year and in the last year. This includes, but isn't limited to, historic investments in the DOE Science for the Future Act and the forthcoming Innovation and Competitiveness Package, which is now on its 5th or 6th name. That is via the Competes, you seek, or whatever. It's now being conferenced in the House, and it'll authorize over $6.4 billion in critical fusion energy research and development over the next 5 years. And I'm perhaps most heartened by the historic funding we just secured for the fusion program in the FY22 Omnibus Spending Package. Chuck is an appropriator, and it is a critical part of putting that into place. And the president just signed it, I think, yesterday. With these investments, DOE will initiate a new milestone-based public-private partnership and continue the important research and construction work happening in the DOE's Office of Fusion Energy Sciences. As we turn to the 2023 budget, though, it's essential that the administration include a strong request for the DOE Office of Science, where the fusion programs are housed. I hope that this request, which will come on the heels of the event today, will reflect the robust funding needed to continue U.S. leadership in fusion energy and push forward our goal of commercialization. This is essential, and I cannot stress this point strongly enough. Cynics have often suggested that over the decades, we've spent just enough money on fusion that it never happens. This administration has changed that, and we want to celebrate that and really be thankful. So I'm honored to be here with the pioneers of the next great leap for humanity. Thank you for your leadership and your vision. I look forward to hearing your lively discussion today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Congressman Beyer. Finally, I'd like to introduce Congressman Chuck Fleischmann of Tennessee, who is a member of the bipartisan House Fusion Caucus. Thank you.
Dr. Nelson, thank you. Madam Secretary, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be with you today. Personal note of thanks, I want to thank the Secretary. She has come to Oak Ridge and visited what I think is the greatest DOE reservation in the country, our great national lab, our Y-12 UPF project, and of course our legacy cleanup, which is so critically important environmentally all around the country. So Madam Secretary, thank you. To my colleague, Congressman Beyer, thank you so much for coming up with this great idea. I would like to, before I get into my prepared remarks, talk a little bit about the caucus venues in Congress. Congressman Beyer came up with an idea for the Fusion Caucus. He came as a Democrat to me, a Republican, and said, would you join me in this? I actually co-chair the National Labs Caucus with my friend from Illinois, Mr. Foster. I'm actually the chair of the less than glamorous but very important Nuclear Cleanup Caucus, which is so important, cleaning up legacy waste in so many communities around the country. You'd be surprised when I go into rooms, and as Don alluded to in his speech, certain things that he brings up, I bring up the caucus venues because it's incredible. You get Republicans and Democrats, senators and House members in a room in a caucus environment, and so many of the partisan edges just fade away. It's amazing how well we can work together. And Don, I look forward to working with you on Fusion. A little bit about me. I represent the people of the 3rd District of Tennessee and have done so for over a decade. I am from Chattanooga, a city in the South. The Secretary's been kind enough to visit there as well. But little did I know a city called Oak Ridge was going to be and has been in my district since my tenure in Congress. What an opportunity. The Oak Ridge National Laboratory, and yes, I am biased. I love all of the national labs, all 17 of them. But seriously, the Oak Ridge National Lab is a multi-purpose national lab. It is strong on every front. Everything a national lab does, we do at Oak Ridge, and it's truly incredible, including fusion energy. So I think Dr. Zachariah is watching us today. We have people from the lab here. Appreciate that. We also have people, if you'll excuse me, I did not wear the green today. Happy St. Patrick's Day to everyone, but I am a Tennessee Vol, so I have my orange on, and UT is here physically, and I appreciate that so much. And I think we're playing later today. Talked about what I do in Congress. Whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, I'm always going to be in the minority in Congress. People look at me and say, what are you talking about? Why? Because I am an appropriator. Don, my good friend, is an authorizer. Many of my friends on my side of the aisle, most of them, are authorizers. And on the other side of the aisle are authorizers. Why is it so important about appropriations? We are always going to be in that minority, but we fund the key missions. And yes, thank you, Don, for talking about the omnibus bill, the 22 omnibus bill, which I voted for as a Republican, okay? I thought that was very important. And what did we do? critically important. $713 million in fiscal 22 for funding for fusion energy sciences. That's a tremendous accomplishment, and that speaks to the strong bipartisan, bicameral, and executive support for those missions, including $45 million to get the fusion cost share program off the ground. Madam Secretary, you're right. It's not enough, but it is a start. Candidly, as you know, I am a fission person by nature. I am co-chair of the Advanced Nuclear Caucus, another caucus in Congress, and I'm very passionate about nuclear energy, and so pleased that Secretary has been so strong in her support of that. And that is where we are now. But I really think the future is in fusion, and I think we can't overlook this. Right in my own district, we've got a company, and I think I see them here today, General Fusion, is actually going to put their national headquarters in Oak Ridge, and I so appreciate that. So Oak Ridge is ready. Oak Ridge National Laboratory, our community is ready to be there to work with our colleagues in Princeton and around the country on fusion energy. But I do really believe it's the future. A few specifics that I'd like to talk about. I have worked and voted for the ITER project, which is in France. The United States owns about 9% of that and has worked on that for years. That's been a haul, candidly, to get funded throughout both Democratic and Republican administrations. And I think that's very important that we continue to work and to fund that. But where is the key work being done? At ORNL, okay? You can see where my bias is. Now, we certainly appreciate all of our other friends working on this in Princeton and at MIT. I had dinner with my friend, former Secretary of Energy Ernie Moniz, a few weeks back, and we talked about fusion. And there's great agreement on these issues. So look forward to working with you all. Let me be a little bit more specific before I conclude my remarks so that you know what we're doing. ITER is already delivering practical experience with supply chains, regulations, and building integration systems for a reactor-scale fusion plant. This is invaluable for a path to commercial fusion energy. Several key developments from the past year. This is how current we are. The first two central solenoid modules for the superconducting magnet at the heart of ITER were delivered to the ITER site in southern France. ORNL fusion experts contributed to diagnostic technology behind the new fusion record set by the Joint European Torus in 2021. JET was able to document the generation of 59 megajoules of sustained fusion power, more than doubling the previous 1997 record. The Material Plasma Exposure Experiment, MPEX, under construction at ORNL, will deliver expanded materials science capabilities and will be capable of producing fusion reactor relevant plasma conditions for materials and component study. I could go on and talk about this. Bottom line, we need a bicameral, bipartisan, in fact, I would argue nonpartisan commitment to fusion energy. I am so glad that as we work, and Madam Secretary, you are probably, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, you're the 5th Secretary of Energy with whom I've worked, and it's a privilege and a pleasure. We can work together to get this done. And let me make this clear, whether it's fission, fusion, nuclear energy, the world is very competitive. Our foes and our friends are in this venue. And I want the United States to continue to do what we have done from Oak Ridge from the inception of the Manhattan Project, to lead in fusion energy as we do in other forms of sustainable energy. Thank you. It's been a privilege.
Thank you, Congressman Beyer and Fleischman, for your leadership. So let's get underway. OSTP and the Department of Energy have planned an amazing fusion energy summit today. We'll hear from a range of panelists about this exciting technology that can unlock clean energy possibilities. Our summit will continue shortly after this video. Thank you all.
Hi, I'm Scott Hsu. I'm Program Director at ARPA-E, as Secretary Granholm mentioned earlier, and I am very honored and excited to begin my new role soon as Senior Advisor for Fusion in the DOE. Before we jump into our three exciting panel discussions, we would first like to show a 5-minute video with acknowledgments to the DOE team. This video introduces Fusion and DOE's very long-standing investments in fusion R&D and support that brought us to this very exciting moment. So our colleagues will hopefully cue the video.
Global energy consumption is predicted to double by the year 2050. Meeting this demand using clean energy sources will require a bold leap. Fortunately, there is a technology that offers the potential for limitless energy with no carbon emissions. More than 99% of the visible universe is an energetic state of matter called plasma. Through the process of fusion, charged particles in plasma collide and release energy. Fusion is the fundamental source of energy in the universe and fuels stars like the sun. Harnessing fusion on Earth has been a goal of scientists and nations for decades. In the United States, the Department of Energy has led a long history of fusion research, beginning in the mid-20th century, when our predecessor, the Atomic Energy Commission, founded laboratories and programs to pursue fusion energy. A new scientific field was born, one requiring physicists, engineers, and mathematicians. The commitment to fusion energy in the United States and abroad has charted a course that envisions fusion power on the grid in the 21st century. To produce energy on the scale of a typical power plant, scientists today aim to build a fusion device that generates a self-heating plasma using a tiny amount of fuel. This journey began in the 1950s and 60s as scientists tested fundamental fusion concepts. Since then, they have developed a range of fusion devices and discovered other applications. To produce the energy gains needed for a power plant, a fusion device must meet some extraordinary conditions. The plasma in a device must reach extreme temperatures, up to 10 times the temperature at the center of the sun. So scientists demonstrated these enormous temperatures in laboratory experiments. The plasma must also be concentrated enough for many particles to collide at the same time. So scientists devised ways to stabilize and confine higher concentrations of plasma. The device itself must confine the hot, concentrated plasma long enough to produce useful energy. So scientists developed stronger magnets to confine and control the plasma for longer times at larger facilities. Today, government labs, universities, and companies are advancing many different concepts for a fusion power plant based on decades of DOE research. One concept, called magnetic confinement, has been the focus of major international efforts. Another concept is inertial confinement, which uses lasers or other methods to compress and ignite a small target of fuel in billionths of a second. Through the space age into the information age, fusion research became a driving force for developing new technologies with applications in manufacturing, medicine, and more. For example, scientists used plasma to develop smaller, more powerful computer chips. Meanwhile, fundamental research provided new insight into planets, stars, and the universe. Technology development also advanced the goal of practical fusion energy, resulting in new superconducting magnets and tools for understanding plasma and device performance. In the 1990s, 2 experiments, one in the United States and one in Europe, broke a string of fusion performance records. These experiments tested an abundant fuel known as deuterium-tritium, which are 2 forms of hydrogen. Deuterium is derived from seawater, and tritium can be made in a fusion plant from lithium. The end of the 20th century saw the initiation of the world's largest fusion collaboration, which includes the United States. The ITER device, now under construction in France, is expected to make its first plasma later this decade. Today, as part of DOE, U.S. fusion researchers have access to some of the world's top facilities in materials science and high-performance computing, which are key to fusion development. DOE manages 2 modern magnetic confinement facilities where scientists conduct experiments and share data. The department also leads an inertial confinement fusion program that uses high-powered lasers and pulsed power. And U.S. researchers collaborate abroad, connecting them to fusion innovations around the globe. There are more than 130 experimental fusion devices worldwide and counting. With surging private sector investment in the United States and emerging breakthroughs in science and technology, fusion experts agree now is the time for a bold, decadal mission to bring fusion to the grid. Now is the time to bring a future of clean, lasting energy to the nation and the world.
Hope everyone enjoyed that video and is properly jazzed up for the remainder of the event. I also want to thank all our government leaders who gave those inspiring remarks. Thank you very much for your leadership and vision. So, I guess, one moment. So, I would like to welcome the first panel. The first panel is on the status and benefits of fusion technology. The panel will be moderated by Dr. Kim Budil, who is the director of Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory. I invite Dr. Budil and the distinguished panelists to the table. Dr. Budil will introduce the panel members.
Welcome to this very exciting event today. I have to say the remarks this morning were incredibly energizing and heartening to me, who has worked in and around this community for a very long time. This really does feel like a special moment in time, and I think this event really highlights that. As we all know, and as this video really highlighted, fusion energy is the grand scientific challenge of our time, and it's going to require significant innovation and real leadership to realize it. It grew out of a long tradition of American leadership in this field, growing out of our national security programs and expanding into energy programs. And I think that synergistic pursuit of many approaches is a key characteristic for why we're at this exciting moment in time. It has been a great year for fusion. We've had enormous breakthroughs in both magnetic fusion and in inertial fusion that really make it realistic. We used to always say fusion energy was 50 years away from whatever day you asked. And I would say that is closing fast. So really an exciting time. As the US and the world start thinking about net zero energy, fusion energy has a real potential to contribute. The urgency and the scale of this challenge really demand that we work differently. We need partnerships. We need to bring our colleagues in universities, the national laboratories, private industry, and the utilities together. And we need to work with communities. I think the focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion, and energy justice is really important in this. We want to start from a great foundation and build from there. And for me, diversity is really essential to excellence and innovation. It's not something that's a nice to have in this environment. And we need to build a workforce that reflects the communities that will ultimately benefit from this technology. So with that, I'd like to get started by talking a little bit about what is new in fusion and what is different now. But first, I'm going to briefly introduce my distinguished panelists. I'm very excited to sit here with all of them. To my right is Dr. Kathy McCarthy. She's the Associate Laboratory Director for Fusion and Fission Energy and Science at Oak Ridge National Laboratory, a great national laboratory, as we all heard. Next to her is Dr. Abdullah Darwish, who's the Presidential Professor at Dillard University. Then we have Dr. Ann White, who's head of nuclear science and engineering at MIT. Then Dr. Stephen Cowley, director of another fine national laboratory, the Princeton Plasma Physics Laboratory. And then batting cleanup for us on the end, Mr. Mark Berry, who's the vice president for research and development at the Southern Company. So with that, I'm going to turn to our first question. What is new in fusion and why now? And I'm going to point to my colleague, Dr. Cowley, down the way to start us off.
First, figure out how to turn it on.
It's not like it's fusion, come on.
Yeah, right, exactly. The Secretary said it, fusion is hard. And in some sense, that intimidation has always hung over our field. But fusion is in fact doable. 2021 was an amazing year for fusion. I don't think we've had a year like this ever in the history of fusion. On August the 8th, the National Ignition Facility reached 1.3 megajoules of output with just under 2 megajoules going in. But what was more important about that actual shot was it was the first time that we start to see a fusion burn. A fusion burn is when fusion energy provides the energy to keep the fuel at about 100 million degrees, and you start to see the thing burn just like a fire burns. An astonishing result, actually, and congratulations to Lawrence Livermore Lab for that. And then on the 21st of December, just inside 2021, the Joint European Torus at the Great Lab of Culham in the United Kingdom reached an average of over 10 million watts of fusion power for over 5 seconds, as long as they could sustain it, because the machine gets too hot otherwise. Absolutely remarkable result, an incredible result for that team there, just as the team in Livermore. But how do we get here? How do we get to, being able to actually make fusion fuel at over 100 million degrees and sustain it and get fusion to actually happen, show that fusion is in fact doable? We got here through science, through a program at the Department of Energy that has sustained their scientific inquiry over decades to get to the point which has only really happened, I think, in the last 10 years, where we can really predict the behavior of these systems and calculate it on those enormous computers that the Department of Energy runs. This is actually the step forward that I think is most significant, because if we're now going to accelerate to commercial fusion, we've got a lot to do. It's not straightforward once you've made fusion happen, as we have, to go to commercial fusion. But we have the tools to do it, in that we understand the behavior of a plasma at 100, 200 million degrees and how to hold it. And that is an intellectual triumph, and one that will drive us through to the commercial realization. So I think 2021 was the greatest year of fusion.
I have to agree. Another fine national lab. So Kathy, perhaps you could comment on some of our big experimental facilities.
Yeah, I'd be happy to do that. Another one of the reasons why we're ready to take this big step, move aggressively to commercial fusion, is the knowledge that we've gained through preparing for ITER, through starting the component fabrication, the delivery, the assembly of the different components in southern France. And I'll tie also the recent experiments in JET provided information that validated the physics for ITER. So the fusion program is very international, all these pieces coming together. When you actually design something in detail, when you do the fabrication, you have to write the specifications with very exacting tolerances. That's important for fusion. So what we're learning from the component fabrication for ITER feeds in directly into the design work that will go on for a pilot plant, the actual assembly of the plant. So it's really important, that piece that's coming into the whole big picture of how do we actually get there. In the ITER project, there are a series of fabrication, assembly, commissioning steps that lead up to first plasma and then post-first plasma as the machine moves towards DT operations and the scientific exploitation that will provide the data to optimize a plant. So we know enough to build a fusion pilot plant. Going that next step to competitive fusion energy, that's a big step. So the information that we'll get from the highly diagnosed machine that is ITER, it has more diagnostics than any other machine, all of that will feed into our readiness, shape what a commercial plant would look like, and ensure that we actually get there.
That's great. Anne, perhaps you'd like to comment?
Off and on again. Okay, now it's on. So this is an extraordinarily special moment, right? And not just because of what we've already heard right now, but also because the community has come together and spoken with an extraordinarily powerful voice that we are ready to move fast for fusion. There was a comprehensive community planning process that happened. That led into a Fusion Energy Sciences Advisory Committee report that laid out a strategic plan, not just for what it takes to push fusion faster with technology, but also to invest in the basic science and the basic research and continue that. This then fed into a National Academies report, aptly titled, Bringing Fusion to the U.S. Grid. And that report put forth a roadmap. And one big element of that roadmap is harnessing, right, the interest from the private sector. And that's really exciting because that's pushing the drive for a fusion pilot plant even faster. And from a technical perspective, what's really neat about what's happening in the private sector now is the designs that they're thinking about are compact. They're smaller scale than NIF, smaller scale than ITER. And all these pieces coming together, all the community coming together in these different ways, it's a historical opportunity.
I think that's just right, and it highlights that even though there have been tremendous scientific advances, there is work that remains, significant R&D, and as I was commenting to someone earlier, it's not a simple engineering problem to take this next step, so bringing all these people together will be critically important. So I'd like you to comment on some of the challenges that do persist and your perspective for overcoming them as we start to take these next steps. And Kathy, if you could start us off, please.
Sure. So a key piece that we need in order to move to commercial fusion is what the community calls fusion technology. So we have the ability to produce heat in the plasma. How do you take that heat and turn it into something usable, whether it's electricity or actually process heat? We have in the community what we call a blanket. Fission community does this as well. But the blanket is that component that then extracts that heat and ultimately turns it into something useful. Now, the focus in the program has been on the science, as you've heard, because getting the science right was the key first step. Now what we have to do is look at the fusion technology piece. And as an example, when you look at materials, we're confident that we've got the materials that could be used in a pilot plant. But what we don't have is the materials that would make a practical, economical, commercial plant. They need to withstand very extreme environments for long periods of time. If you take the fission industry as an example, they run over 90% of the time consistently. They run for 18 to 24 months straight and do all their maintenance in about a month-long period. And we've got to look at that as a goal. We can't have lots of shutdowns. If we're going to be replacing components, then we've got to do it in the shortest time scale possible because you have to figure in that big picture. What does commercial fusion mean? Well, it means maximizing the time that the machine is actually running. It means minimizing the costs of running those machines, because in the end, it's going to have to be competitive. So the time is now for these investments in the fusion technology side, and I just mentioned materials as one of them. The fuel cycle is another one. We need to have a sustainable fuel cycle. The experiments now all use more fuel than they actually create, but we have to create more than we actually use in order to make it competitive. So that's another major piece that's necessary. So looking at these machines, figuring out what does the blanket look like, what does the fuel cycle look like, how do the materials withstand this harsh environment, That's a step that's needed, and we need to make investments in that now.
Very good. And I think that another persistent challenge is also the time it can take sometimes for these technologies to be developed and be deployed. And we've got to push fusion faster so that we can impact climate change. And some ways of doing that are getting together more creatively and having more creative partnerships. One example happened at MIT and Commonwealth Fusion Systems. Through a collaboration in just 3 years, they achieved a 20 Tesla magnet made of new high-temperature superconducting material. And this material wasn't really commercially available until about 7 years ago. That's fast. That's fast R&D. That's really fast translation. And that's what we need more of. We need more of these creative ways of pulling partners together, right? So that we can bring all the strengths to bear, the strengths of America's universities, the strengths of our companies, and the strengths of our national labs. And this is really, I think, the thing we've got to get right at this point in time.
I think that's right, and it really highlights the multidisciplinary nature of our field. We saw in the video many of the technologies that have spun out from the fusion community: extreme ultraviolet lithography, laser peening and machining. Medical technologies like MRI are built on the technologies from this community. So that spin-out effect demonstrates there's been a huge amount of progress.
It's a really, really great point, and we want to make sure we counter a notion that fusion has been too insular. We really have been pushing out science, pushing out technology, pushing out that knowledge, and we've got to bring people in. And really fast-paced, interdisciplinary projects with milestones, it pulls in talent. It's really attractive and exciting.
So perhaps, Professor Darwish, you could comment on the people dimension of this challenge.
One of the challenges really in fusion community is the lack of diversity. For example, if you look at Black African American, they consist about 4% only from all this, physics graduates. If you go down a little bit, you will find Latinos 10%. If you look at the big picture, you will find Black females 1% in physics. So this is a big challenge for us to increase this one. I work at Dillard University. It's a small HBCU at Louisiana, New Orleans. And we are actually one of the top physics program graduating African American in physics in the country. And if you look a little bit for minority females, we are actually number 2 in the United States producing African American females in physics. This is a huge. And this is actually what can make us to think, how can we learn from education system like that? Why a small institution like Dillard University producing that much of African American in physics and African American females in physics? So this is one of the lessons which we need to learn. Other institutions are supposed to come and say, what is exactly you have done? I've been at Dillard University for almost about 24 years. Before that, I was at Alabama A&M University. Yes, he's happy. Alabama A&M University, where I graduated many physics students, PhDs, and master students. And one day I said, you know what? Let's go to a place which does not have actually any research type of energy or something like that, and establish a great program which can be a hub for HBCU to produce minority females, produce males and females, both of them from physics. And this didn't come between day and night. It's over 2 decades, actually. We got this type of national standing to produce African American in physics. The same for nuclear engineering, because in this community, for fusion community, we need everyone to participate, either engineers, either physicists, chemists, everybody. But we need to look at the picture for the United States, how it will be the workforce for everybody. Why it's not too much minority? What can we do to increase the number of minorities actually in that field? most recently, actually, we got funded by DOE, Insight Center. I am a co-PI for that center with MSU, Michigan State Universities are the leading institution. And that center actually is to train the next generation to have the exact combination of hands-on training and the minds-on training to make them valuable to the society. It's not just about degree or just give them a degree and let's go hunt for a job. It will not happen because anyone who wants to hire you, they need to find really qualities in you. They need to see that you are investing in this company or that place.
I think that's really, it's harder than you think to push the button. I think that's really interesting, and the impact you've had on the field in helping to diversify the field is really inspiring, so thank you for that. I'd like to turn a little bit toward the partnership ecosystem. We've all highlighted the role of public and private sector investment in driving the field forward. I think that's really important. You know, the public sector has a long horizon. They make long-term commitments to really, really challenging technical problems. And so now we're at a point where we can build and leverage upon that base that was built by the public sector. And then private sector brings energy and urgency to the problem. So those two communities meeting in the middle really is our opportunity to drive this forward. The community we haven't talked about yet is our customer, the utilities. So I'd like to turn to Mr. Mark Berry and ask about your thoughts on the ecosystem and this interplay between public and private sector.
Well, first of all, I want to say how exciting this particular meeting has been thus far. And, you know, your comments earlier about 2021 being a great year in fusion, in my mind, the best year is going to be when you're producing energy and providing that to customers. Clean, safe, affordable, and reliable energy to customers. That is the grand vision. That's why I'm here. As a utility, we are definitely focused and open-minded, and we want to bring this technology to bear so that we can provide that energy to our customers. So, you know, when I think about this particular issue, I think now is the time to expand the public and private partnerships to include the end users. I've heard a lot this morning about how hard fission is. If it's going to be in my industry, it's going to have to be a little bit easier. But we're excited, and we want to be part of that solution to bring this technology to bear. This is not the type of technology that you're going to do the development and then throw it over the fence at the end and expect us to use it. So I think now is the time for the end user to get involved. I think the sooner we do that, the better for us to learn and help you harden your technology so that we get a solution that is robust and fits our needs.
That's really great. So from your perspective, what are some of the performance requirements we should be thinking about?
You know, I want to start my comments, though, with the energy sector is at a crossroads. And when I say energy, I mean that broadly. We've heard about the 2035 vision from President Biden for zero carbon electricity. But when I speak of energy, I think about it much broader. Energy companies have made net zero 2050 commitments, company like mine, Southern Company, and we recognize that we need transformational technologies to bring that future to bear. The 2050 energy company is likely to be very different than the 2020 energy company. We know that we'll need a diverse set of technologies to solve very specific problems. It is my belief that fusion energy could provide base load energy to our customers. And that's something that's very important. Remember, for us as a utility, we want to provide clean, safe, reliable, and affordable energy to our customers. If we want to accelerate that future, and I hear at this meeting today, many want that, I think it's time to broaden the public-private partnership to include the end user.
I think that's just right, and I think that's why we're here today, now. We're at a point where we can start building realistic partnerships across that full spectrum. So coming back to that theme of now is the time for us, What's really different now from 25 years ago, and how can we take advantage of this moment? So I'll turn again to you, Steve.
I think what's different now is people have a vision that we can actually deliver a commercial product, right? And the advent of private funding in fusion on a level that exceeds the public funding is going to transform the pace at which we move towards the end point. So I think that's a huge part of why we're here today, right? That's going to transform the way we're doing things. I would also back up on what Mark said there a little bit. Fusion is really a perfect energy source because not only could it do the base load, but in a world in which renewables are going to play a huge role in our future, we need firm energy sources, ones that you can switch on when the wind don't blow and the sun don't shine. Never shines in Britain. And fusion can be that, right? We've just got to develop it.
That's great. Kathy?
So one of the things that we're seeing is disruptive technologies. One of the great things about having all these different entities looking at fusion, moving fusion forward, and this is all part of diversity, people looking at things from different perspectives. So disruptive technologies are important. You heard a little bit about the high temperature superconducting magnets and the progress that has been made there. We heard a little bit about the computing that makes so many things possible, supercomputers, speeds that we never thought possible. All of these things are really important, and that's what we need to do. We've got to think out of the box. We've got to bring all these partners together, think out of the box. How do we do these things better? And it's going to take all of that for fusion.
I think that's right, and I think one reason you're seeing such a large presence from the Department of Energy National Labs is because we're home to some of the key tools that will be really important to this whole ecosystem. So we have the large-scale experimental facilities and computational tools that can help drive these partnerships forward. And it's not just facilities like ITER and NIF that can explore the physics at scale. It's our light sources and neutron sources to learn about materials and develop new materials, and our computing capabilities, which we can make broadly accessible, that will soon be at the exascale, allowing us to really tackle some of these incredibly vexing problems. So we're not the only ones who are pursuing fusion. The international community has made big investments in this science and technology. So I'm interested in your perspective on the competition and what opportunities for collaboration you see on the horizon.
Fusion has always been very, very international. It's one of the things that attracted me to the field in graduate school. Being able to have the opportunity to work with the greatest minds from around the world is key. And what you'll find is the scientists, the engineers, we all work together very, very well. We'll let other people worry about the politics. But we've had long-standing collaborations, not just with ITER, but with the UK, with Korea, with Europe, with Japan. I've probably not mentioned all of them. All of that gives us practical experience, access to that expertise, and these people working together. That's really how we're going to be able to move all of this forward. So these international partnerships are key. We benefit to them. We benefit from them. That you can't underestimate the practical experience of working with an operating machine, with actually fabricating components, because you learn so much. So these international collaborations, bringing together best minds, this is what we've got to continue moving forward.
Steve?
If we don't choose to do fusion, somebody else will, right? There are very well-funded programs in China, in Europe, in Korea, doing marvelous things. We don't want somebody else to be the Saudi Arabia of fusion. We want to be it.
That is a great soundbite for the day. Yeah. So I want to turn to another set of topics that we have discussed, which is diversity, equity, and inclusion. This is critically important to this field, which is making strides, but there is more to be done. And I'm interested in some proactive steps that, as a community, we could take to really advance the cause of diversity, equity, and inclusion in the field of fusion. And I'll start with you, Professor Darwish.
Yes. Now it is time. We have
You have to turn your...
Yeah, I'm sorry. And now it is time, and always it is time. We have been talking about fusion energy, and this may be about 50 some years ago, and we are saying that it will happen and maybe it will happen after 10, 20, 30 again. We don't know. But who's going to lead? Who's going to lead? So diversity is so important to bring everyone to the table. Everyone has to be part of this major task force. When this is happening, somebody will lead, because who knows, I will not be here. So, but somebody actually has to lead. So what can we do? What can be done? We have to start early. We have to start actually from K to 12. We have to introduce this type of technology to them. We have to revamp the curriculum from K to 12. We have to introduce a strong science program there. You go to the high school, middle school, they say, well, physics is a part which hard, you cannot take it. If you need to take it, then this is something else. But we need actually to inject actually this science early on to those kind of students which will be leaders for tomorrow. We have to actually participate with the community. We have to educate the community. When something like this happens, we'll find them actually supporting us, not will be against us. So we need to start now to train them in the future technologies. We need to let them know those minorities actually part of this plan, either Black, Latinos, others. Then we go back to the source of those students, where they're going to come from. They're going to come from HBCU. They're going to come from MSI. Then we have to introduce this type of technology to the community, to the parents, to the public, to let them know what type of technology I'm talking about and how we can improve this type of technology. So early on in my life, I learned that hands-on training and the minds-on training, one of the most important key element to prepare minorities. So when I went to Dillard University after Alabama A&M University, I established actually great labs over there supported by the Army and the Air Force. And this is where, if you come to that lab, you will not think Dillard University had this type of technology. We are one of the undergraduate institution at HBCU, which we have 3 patents, and we have 9 patents actually applied for it. So we are the only HBCU university without a graduate program has patent. And this is where we train our students. This is where we train them, we give them the knowledge, we give them the hands-on training, we give them the minds-on training. So this is make a great impact on their life. Now they graduate, they have all the essence and the technology, the training, which they can go to graduate school or they can go to the task force. Anybody will accept them. Where our students, it's everywhere, from NASA to the Navy to Boeing to Fermi Lab. They are working there, they are leaders there. It's not just giving them a desk to sit and sign papers. No, they are in the decision making. And this is what we need to show actually minorities they can do it. They have to be part of this discussion. They have to be part of our plans. So always people, they ask me, how can we thank you for that? I said, nothing. Just to find somebody who needs the help and give him the same help which we actually needs for to be one like you. And always I say, it's not much, it's not how much you can take. It's how much you can you leave behind when you go. It's a building legacy. And this is something which every one of us around this table has to do it actually, to think how we can build a legacy when we go.
Thank you. Anne, would you like to?
Absolutely. I think that this role of training the workforce, the role of our universities, our community colleges, our vocational schools, the role of retraining programs for workers who are affected by the energy transition. This is really essential to put a focus on. And you mentioned graduate school. We need these talented students to come in for PhDs in physics and engineering. Fusion also needs highly skilled mechanics, technicians, electricians. We need lawyers. We need policy experts. We need communication experts. We need behavioral scientists, social scientists, folks who can think about siting, manufacturing, and supply chain development, you know. We need everyone to come to the table because we need the people who are going to be building, in every sense of the word, a transformational new energy source in a global economy. And at this horizon, we've got to embrace DEI, and we've got to bring everyone in.
So how do we facilitate this energy transition in a way that will, you know, mitigate the impacts of climate change, but also set up investment opportunities in disadvantaged communities?
It's a big question, and I know we don't have time to get into it, and other panels will. But as you mentioned, Kim, it's about a new type of ecosystem, not just for research, but also for deployment, because we want the fusion plants to be built in the USA, made in the USA, and we want those to be the ones that you buy, Dr. Berry. And so fusion and this new energy industry can create jobs, really good jobs in this country.
So we talked about the need for diversity for technical success. I'm interested in your perspectives on how we can leverage this diverse workforce to create public acceptance and really enhance the overall economic competitiveness of fusion. So perhaps, Steve, you might comment.
You know, getting to commercial fusion needs astonishing innovation. And why would you tie your hand behind your back and not exploit all of the talent that America has, right? That's just the bottom line, right? We're not doing it. We're not doing it as well as we should do, and we need to do better. The innovations, as a foreigner, one of the things I find about America is that the cultural melting pot is one of the greatest forces for the creativity that this country has. We're not doing well enough in the scientific enterprise to exploit that. That's just
Perhaps as the one who has to take it to the community, Mark, you could comment for us.
Yeah, these have been very interesting discussions on this panel. And I want to tell you why intentionality is imperative. If a utility is going to build a fusion facility, it's going to take an elected official to approve you building that facility. And it's going to take a community welcoming that technology. You know, when you build a facility, it's going to be a part of the fabric of that community for decades, 5, maybe 10 decades. And when you think about it that way, it really makes you realize how much we need intentionality in this space. At some point, there's going to be a grandmother or a school teacher that's going to be in a public meeting saying if they want this technology in their community. Now is the time to build that type of support. It takes intentionality and inclusion to do that. I would encourage this type of public and private partnership to think about the end in mind and how much inclusion is needed.
And that's fantastic. So we're coming up to the end of our panel, but we have a few questions that have come in from email, so I'm going to try to get 1 or 2 of them in. How can fusion R&D leverage fission R&D experience, infrastructure, partnerships, and regulations? Anyone?
Yeah, so I'll be happy to answer that. I've actually spent about half my career in fusion and half my career in fission, and my fusion career has been in fusion technology. There are many synergies. There are materials issues that are common to both. Fission is an extreme environment as well. A little higher energy neutrons in the fusion environment, but we need to learn from that. In addition, when we look at blanket designs, that type of thing. So what I would argue is with respect to what needs to be done moving forward, lots of synergies. We ought to be able to be working, we ought to be working together to get to where we need to be for a commercial plant. And I know we don't have a lot of time, so I'll stop there.
Oh, that's great. So I'm going to ask one more question and then we'll wrap up. If money were no object, and I think we heard that maybe soon money won't be an object, what would you do differently? Any thoughts? National lab directors always have thoughts.
Spend it at Princeton. No, no. I think there are probably 4 or 5 really promising ideas that might make it to fusion, commercial fusion. And the difficulty will be choosing between them. If money was no object, this is like in the Manhattan Project, you had to separate uranium. We'll try everything that we need to do. That's probably what we would do if money was no object, and try and accelerate. The sooner we have fusion, right, the better our prospects for going to net zero. And so we have to do it.
Yeah. And I think that's a great note to finish on. And the analogy to the Manhattan Project, I think, is apt. These are the moments where the U.S. is great. This is where we really thrive. There's a really important problem. It requires over-the-horizon S&T to come together now. It requires new types of partnerships. It requires everyone to pull together to really drive this forward. It requires the government to come together across agencies to coordinate, to drive this innovation and to give us a real sense of urgency behind this problem. So I am personally confident that this community can rise to meet this challenge, and I look forward to doing it with all of you. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Budil and distinguished panelists. There were many inspiring and